My name is Martin Rhodes, and at 55, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. For most of my life, I had always been the one others could rely on, the provider, the protector, the man who worked tirelessly to build a future for his family. After my wife Anna passed away 5 years ago, I threw myself into our dream, the Willow Ridge Farm, a piece of land we had spent years cultivating together. It was our haven, the place where we'd planned to retire, far away from the stresses of city life. The farm was a symbol of everything we had built, of love, sacrifice, and hard work. It was supposed to be a sanctuary for me now, a place to find peace in the quiet of the rolling Vermont hills, a place where Anna's memory still lingered, like the scent of pine in the air or the way the sun touched the land in the early mornings. But recently I found myself questioning everything. My daughter, Hannah, had always been independent. She had never been the easiest child, always driven by ambition and a fierce will, but I loved her nonetheless. Over the years, I had supported her. Education, career choices, the house she bought with Caleb, her husband. I never once hesitated to provide for her, to give her what she needed, even if it meant sacrificing my own desires. But this time, things were different. It wasn't just about giving her what she wanted or needed. This time, Hannah was taking something that wasn't hers. The Willow Ridge Farm, the place Anna and I had dreamed of together, was now under threat, and I never saw it coming. It was a late evening when she came to me, her face set with an expression I had seen many times before, a mixture of determination and something colder, something more calculating. Hannah wasn't the same girl who used to come to me with questions about her future or with a smile after a tough day. This was a different Hannah, one I didn't recognize as well as I should have. She looked at me, her arms crossed tightly, her gaze hard and unyielding. "Dad, we're giving the farm to Caleb's family. They need it more than you do," she said, her voice sharp and final. "You haven't even come here to use it. It's just sitting here, empty." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. My own daughter, the one I had given everything to, was telling me that the farm, the very heart of everything Anna and I had worked for, was no longer mine. And not only that, she was handing it over to Caleb's family, who had no more claim to it than a stranger on the street. I opened my mouth, wanting to protest, to explain that it wasn't just a piece of property, that this farm was a part of me, a part of Anna. But the words got stuck. The shock, the betrayal, it paralyzed me. "Dad, I've made the decision," she continued, her voice lacking any warmth, any understanding. "You haven't used it anyway. Caleb's parents need a place to stay. They've been struggling, and this farm will help them." I wanted to scream, to tell her that this wasn't just about money or convenience. This was my life's work. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. I looked at her, and the pain of her dismissal hit me like a freight train. I had given her everything, every penny, every moment of patience, every bit of love I could offer. And now she was treating me like a stranger, a nobody. I wasn't even allowed to stay in the home I had built, the home Anna and I had planned to grow old in. "Fine," I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Fine, I'll leave." It felt like my whole world was crumbling, but I couldn't bring myself to argue further. I had always been the one to give, to sacrifice, to bend for the people I loved. And here I was, being asked to sacrifice again. This time, though, it felt different. I wasn't being asked to give money or time. I was being asked to give up the very thing that had been a symbol of all my hard work and the life Anna and I had built together. I packed my bags and left that night, not even bothering to argue with her. The pain in my chest was unbearable, but I didn't know how to fight it. How could I fight my own daughter? How could I fight someone I had raised, someone I had always believed would understand the value of family and sacrifice? As I left the Willow Ridge Farm behind, I felt a sense of loss that I couldn't put into words. The place where I had spent countless hours, where Anna and I had built our dreams, now felt like a prison, a place that no longer belonged to me. I drove away in silence, not knowing where I was going or what I was supposed to do next. I had spent so many years focusing on taking care of others, on being the provider, on making sure everyone else had what they needed. But in that moment, I realized that I had forgotten one important thing. I had neglected myself. I had allowed myself to become someone who would sacrifice his own happiness and identity for the sake of others, and now it felt like the price was too high. It took me 3 days to finally get my bearings, 3 days of walking around in a fog, not knowing what to do with myself. I rented a small cabin on the outskirts of town, just far enough away from everything to get some peace and silence. The place was nothing special, rustic, isolated, and exactly what I needed to think. The quiet was deafening at first, but over time it gave me the space I needed to process everything. I kept replaying that conversation in my mind, Hannah's cold words, the finality in her voice when she told me the farm was no longer mine. It hurt more than I expected, but something inside me began to shift. The numbness was starting to wear off, and in its place, anger was creeping in. Anger at myself for letting things go so far, for not standing up to her sooner, for giving her too much and asking for nothing in return. But more than anything, I was angry at Caleb, and at myself for trusting him and his family. I thought about the Willow Ridge farm every moment I could. It was the place Anna and I had dreamed about for so many years, our retirement home, the place we'd grow old together. I had put everything into that farm, my time, my money, my soul. It had been our sanctuary. I hadn't just built that property, I had built our life there. It was more than just land to me. It was the essence of who I was. And now, my own daughter was handing it over to strangers without even so much as a conversation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how completely wrong it was, how much I had been taken advantage of. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let Hannah or anyone else take that place from me without a fight. I spent the next few days making a plan. I knew I couldn't just walk in there and demand it back. If I was going to make a stand, it had to be calculated, strategic. I was a man who had spent his life in the construction business, negotiating, planning, executing. I knew how to get things done when it mattered, and this was no different. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to take control of the situation, not just emotionally, but practically. I called Jordan, an old friend of mine, who had always been into home automation and tech. He had helped me with some upgrades to the farm years ago, but I had no idea he had gotten so involved in the industry. When I told him what had happened, he was stunned. But then, he asked the question I needed to hear. What do you want to do about it? I want to make sure Hannah and Caleb never forget this, I said, my voice steely with resolve. I want to make them regret thinking they could just walk in and take my life's work without a fight. He didn't hesitate. I can help you. You have to trust me, Martin. This will be something they'll never see coming. And so we began. Over the next few days, Jordan and I worked together to set up a system that would turn the Willow Ridge farm into a smart home fortress, one that would send a message to anyone who thought they could take what was mine. We installed motion detectors, automated lights, and a sound system that would play specific messages if triggered. The pièce de résistance was a series of water control systems. The idea was to create a full sensory experience, something overwhelming and disorienting, a technological nightmare that would make them wish they'd never set foot on the property. I remember the day we tested it all. It was a small thing, a preview of what would come. I walked through the house, and the lights began flashing in a disorienting pattern. I triggered the motion detectors, and the voice system kicked in, a calm, authoritative voice saying, "You are trespassing. Leave immediately." The lights strobe, and water began running from the faucets. I had no idea how effective it would be, but it was satisfying to watch it all come together. This was no longer just a revenge plan. It was about taking back control. It was a way to show Hannah and Caleb that I wasn't a helpless old man who would bend to their will. I was still a force to be reckoned with. The following weekend, I drove back to the farm. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I had a sense of purpose now. The anger I had been carrying around for days was starting to settle into something more focused, something sharper. As I arrived, I saw them already there. Caleb's parents were unloading boxes from their minivan, their faces full of excitement as they took in their new home. And Hannah was inside, already arranging the furniture like she owned the place. The sight of it all made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. I had a plan. I parked my car and walked up to the front door, my hand gripping the handle. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and entered without knocking. "Dad?" Hannah looked up, clearly surprised. Her face hardened when she saw me standing there, standing my ground. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You can't be here. This place isn't yours anymore." "This is my farm, Hannah," I said, my voice steady and unyielding. "And I'm not leaving. You can't just take it from me." "You don't even use it," she argued, her voice rising. "You're just in the way. Caleb's family needs this place. You've barely been here. What's the problem?" "The problem is that you think you can just take what's mine because you feel like it," I said, stepping closer. "This farm isn't just land, it's my life's work, it's everything I've built, and I won't let you take it." Hannah's eyes flashed with contempt. She stepped closer to me, her tone colder than I had ever heard it before. "Dad, you're old. You've got no use for it. We've been taking care of it, and Caleb's family needs a place to stay. It's theirs now." The words stung, but I held my ground. "No, Hannah, this is still mine. I'm not going anywhere." She glared at me, then turned to Caleb's parents, who were standing awkwardly in the doorway looking between us. The tension in the room was thick. I could feel my resolve hardening, the anger I had felt earlier now replaced by something more powerful, determination. I wasn't leaving. Not this time. Not without a fight. The days following my confrontation with Hannah were a blur. I could feel the weight of what had just happened pressing on me, but there was something else too. Determination. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose again. I wasn't going to let my daughter take away what I had worked my entire life for. As much as it hurt to see her so indifferent, to watch her act as if she had every right to my property, I knew I couldn't back down. I couldn't let her steal the Willow Ridge farm from me, not without a fight. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the task at hand. I reached out to Jordan again, as we had discussed, to ensure that everything was set up perfectly for what I had planned. The house had been transformed into a smart home of sorts, but I wanted to make sure it was more than just a collection of automated systems. I needed it to be unforgettable, something that would make Hannah and Caleb's family reconsider every decision they had ever made. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about respect, about reclaiming what was mine, and about teaching Hannah that no one could take advantage of me anymore. Jordan and I worked tirelessly, tweaking the settings, fine-tuning the motion sensors, adjusting the water control systems. I watched as the farm slowly became a technological maze. I had thought the process would take a lot longer, but with Jordan's expertise, things moved quickly. We were on a deadline. The next time they came to visit, I was ready for them. It wasn't just about the tech, though. It was about making a statement, sending a clear message. I wasn't going to just roll over and let my family take what they wanted. I had given too much of myself for too long. By the time the weekend arrived, the farm was ready. Every corner of the house had been rigged with smart sensors, every faucet connected to a control system that would turn them on in a flash. The lights, programmed to flash in disorienting patterns. The voice assistant, set to announce warnings of trespassing as soon as the sensors were triggered. The system would ramp up as they moved around, increasing the intensity of the lights, the water, and the sound effects. I knew it was a little extreme, but frankly, I didn't care. I was done being the victim, done being the quiet, compliant father who always let people walk over him. The morning of the confrontation, I sat in my small rented cabin, watching the security footage from the cameras I had set up at the farm. I could see the minivan approaching, the same one they had driven last time. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them park at the end of the driveway. I felt a mix of anticipation and something darker. Satisfaction, maybe. They were coming, and they had no idea what was in store for them. When they finally made it to the front door, I was ready. I clicked a button on my phone and watched the motion sensors activate as they stepped inside. The lights flickered on, bright and disorienting, flashing in a rapid strobe pattern. The voice assistant chimed in immediately, its calm, robotic voice cutting through the chaos. Unauthorized intrusion detected. Leave the premises immediately. I could see their faces through the camera feed. Hannah, Caleb, and his parents, confused. Uncertain. I smiled to myself, watching them hesitate, trying to make sense of what was happening. But it was only the beginning. I clicked another button, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the house. Every faucet turned on at once, flooding the rooms with the sound of water pouring out of every sink, shower, and faucet. I couldn't hear their reactions, but I could imagine them now, stumbling around, unsure of what to do. Good. Let them feel the confusion, the discomfort. Let them feel the helplessness I had felt when Hannah dismissed me and took everything I had worked for. I kept watching from my phone, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I knew this wasn't the kind of revenge I should be proud of, but after everything they had done to me, it felt justified. I had given them every opportunity to act with decency, to recognize what they were doing was wrong. But now they had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. I waited, knowing the best was yet to come. The system was still running, sensors triggering every 30 seconds. The lights flickered on and off, the voice assistant reminding them to leave, louder and more insistent now. And then, just as they started to panic, I hit the final button. The system kicked into high gear. The water increased in intensity, flooding the house in a chaotic rush. The lights became even more erratic, flashing wildly in every direction. The voice assistant's commands grew louder, more authoritative. And then, just to really push the point home, I activated the final sequence. Shadows. The projection system came to life, casting ghostly figures on the walls, shadows that moved unnaturally. It was like something out of a horror movie, designed to unsettle and disturb. I watched them scramble, trying to make sense of the madness unfolding around them. Hannah's voice came through the audio system, shouting something I couldn't quite make out. But I could see her, running frantically from room to room, trying to turn off lights, to shut off the water, to find the source of the chaos. Her face was a mask of confusion, panic, and something else, fear. Caleb and his parents weren't faring any better. I could hear their voices echoing in the background as they shouted at each other, but no one could get to the control panel. No one could stop it. They were trapped in the house, a house I had built, and they had no idea how to escape. They didn't understand what was happening, couldn't even fathom how the technology was working. And that was the point. It wasn't just about inconvenience, it was about making them feel powerless. For once, it wasn't me who was helpless. I watched as they finally gave up, retreating from the house in a panic, their plans unraveled by the very thing they had underestimated, me. As they fled, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. I had done it. I had taken back control. But this wasn't just about getting the farm back. It was about reminding myself that I still had power, that I still had the ability to defend what was mine. This was my life's work, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me without a fight. They had made the mistake of underestimating me, and now they would pay the price. The next morning, the silence in my cabin felt different. The usual calm was replaced by a sense of tension I couldn't shake. It was over, or so I thought. I'd watched them leave the farm in a panic, terrified by the chaos I had unleashed on them. They had no idea what hit them, and that's exactly how I wanted it. I wasn't looking for a drawn-out confrontation. I just needed them to understand one simple thing. I wasn't someone to be walked all over anymore. The Willow Ridge farm was mine, and I was going to keep it. But as the day went on, I found myself wondering if they'd learned their lesson. Had the terror of that night truly shaken them, or would they just return, more determined than ever, to take what I had worked my entire life for? I tried to focus on other things, anything to distract myself from the gnawing uncertainty. I took a long walk through the woods behind the cabin, the crisp morning air clearing my head, but it didn't bring the peace I hoped for. The truth was, I was still hurting. Hannah, my daughter, had been so much more than just a child to me. She was my hope for the future, the one person I thought would understand me, especially after Anna died. Instead, she had become someone who dismissed everything I had built, treating the farm like it was nothing but an inconvenience. The betrayal stung deeper than I wanted to admit. But then the phone rang. I didn't even need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. My pulse quickened as I answered, not knowing what to expect. "Dad, we need to talk," Hannah's voice came through, as cold and calculating as it had been the night before. There was no warmth in her tone, no hint of remorse. It was business as usual for her, as if nothing had happened. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though the anger was starting to bubble up again. "I think you know what this is about," she replied, the sharpness in her voice unmistakable. "Caleb's parents are coming back to the farm this weekend. We're still taking possession. The house is theirs, and you can't stop it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had hoped, even for a brief moment, that they would back off, that they'd realize how wrong they were. But this was beyond wrong. It was insulting. Not only was she disregarding everything I had worked for, but now she was forcing this on me with such arrogance, like I had no say in it, like I had no power. I took a breath, my grip tightening around the phone. "You can't do this, Hannah," I said, my voice low, but the conviction was there. "That farm is mine, and you've crossed a line. You're not getting away with this." She didn't hesitate. "I'm done with this, Dad. You've had your time. It's not like you've even been here. Caleb's parents need this, and they're taking it. You can't just keep hoarding it like some old man." That was it. The words I needed to hear. The betrayal was no longer just about the farm. It was about how little she valued me. She had spent years watching me sacrifice everything for her, and now, here she was, treating me like a useless relic. Before I could respond, she added, "We've already made arrangements. They're coming back this weekend, and that's final." My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I didn't, I would lose everything I had gained. I wasn't going to let that happen. "Fine," I said, the word coming out much colder than I intended. "You want a fight? You've got one." I hung up before she could say another word. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't out of fear. It was anger. Pure, unfiltered anger. I had tried to stay civil, to let her think she could walk all over me, but now I knew there was only one way to handle this. She had pushed me to the edge, and there was no going back. I immediately called Nina, my lawyer, who had been handling the legal affairs of the farm for years. The moment she picked up, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to transfer the farm to a trust," I said, my voice firm, "and I need it done before the weekend." "Martin," Nina's voice softened, but I could tell she was already getting the gravity of the situation. "Are you sure? There are implications. You don't want to make a hasty decision." "I'm sure," I interrupted. "Do whatever it takes. I won't let them take it." We spent the next several hours discussing the details. Nina explained the process of transferring the ownership into a trust, which would legally protect the farm from anyone trying to claim it. It was a strong move, a final defense that would ensure Hannah and Caleb's family had no claim to it. But it wasn't just about legalities. It was about sending a message to my daughter that this wasn't something I was going to give up without a fight. By the time I hung up, I had a plan. The trust would be set up by Friday morning, and I would have everything in place by the time Hannah and Caleb showed up at the farm. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the weekend. The technology was already in place, but I wanted to make sure everything was running smoothly. I checked the security systems, made sure the motion sensors were calibrated correctly, and reviewed the schedule for the weekend. Everything was set. As I stood in the middle of the Willow Ridge farm, looking out at the rolling hills that Anna and I had planted with our own hands, I couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia wash over me. This had always been our place, our dream, and now I was about to fight for it with everything I had. By the time Friday evening came, I was ready. I knew what I had to do. I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to let Hannah or Caleb or anyone else take what was mine. The trust was set, and I was about to make sure they knew it. The weekend finally arrived, and with it a sense of finality that had been building inside me for weeks. I had spent countless hours preparing for this day, mentally, emotionally, and legally. Every action I had taken in the past few days had led to this moment, and there was no turning back now. Hannah had pushed me too far, and now I was ready to reclaim what was mine, even if it meant losing everything else in the process. Friday night, as I sat in my cabin overlooking the fields, I thought about what was at stake. The Willow Ridge farm wasn't just a piece of land to me. It was a legacy a testament to the years of hard work Anna and I had invested. It was where we had dreamed of growing old together, and it was where I felt closest to her. The thought of losing it, of having it taken from me without so much as a second thought, had become unbearable. It wasn't just about the farm anymore. It was about respect, about proving that I wasn't going to be walked over. I checked the time. It was just past midnight, and I knew they would be on their way in the morning. I had arranged everything down to the finest detail. The trust was finalized, and I had received the official documents that confirmed the farm's protection. I wasn't just relying on the high-tech systems we had set up to keep them out. No. This time, I was doing it the legal way. I had the full backing of the law, and they couldn't take the farm now, no matter what tricks they tried to pull. I went over the plans in my head one more time. By the time they arrived at the farm on Saturday morning, they would be in for more than they bargained for. My hands were steady, but my mind raced. As much as I had set this up as a response to their disrespect, part of me still felt a deep, painful sorrow at the situation. I had never imagined that it would come to this, that I would have to fight my own daughter over something that should have been a simple matter of family trust and understanding. But I knew there was no way back. I couldn't let them take what was mine. I couldn't let Hannah believe that she could control everything in my life. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer, Nina, confirming that the trust had been officially filed. Everything was legally sound. They had no claim to the property anymore. A small sense of relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. I knew this wasn't over yet. The real battle was about to begin. I drove to the Willow Ridge farm just after sunrise. The familiar landscape was peaceful in the early morning light, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air that I couldn't shake. My thoughts were racing again. What would Hannah say when she found out? Would she even understand why I had done this? I had given her everything I could, but I couldn't give her this. This was mine. It was more than just a house. It was my last connection to Anna, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. As I drove up the familiar winding road to the farmhouse, I saw their car parked near the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. I could feel my chest tighten as I parked beside the house. I stepped out, trying to keep my movements steady, but inside I was anything but calm. I walked toward the front door, and that's when I saw them. Hannah, Caleb, and his parents were already gathered on the porch, carrying boxes and bags as though they were moving in permanently. Hannah saw me approaching and immediately stiffened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp as usual. She wasn't even trying to hide her frustration. This was it, the moment of reckoning. "I'm not going anywhere, Hannah," I said firmly, standing my ground. "This is my farm, and it's still mine." Hannah's eyes flashed with anger. Her jaw clenched as she shot a quick look at Caleb. "You need to leave. We've been more than patient with you. Caleb's family is moving in. This is their home now." "No," I said, the word coming out cold and controlled. "It's not. You can't just take it because you want to. You don't own this place, and neither do Caleb's parents." "Don't start this," she snapped, taking a step toward me. "You can't even take care of it. We've been doing the hard work. You've barely been here." "You don't get to decide what happens to it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This farm is protected by the trust now. It's legally mine, and you can't take it. Not anymore." The words seemed to catch her off guard. She froze for a moment, and I could see the shock creeping into her expression. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "The trust is official, Hannah. I've already transferred everything over. This is my property, and Caleb's parents don't have a say in it." Her face flushed with frustration. "You can't do this. This is ours now. You're just being selfish, Dad. You don't even use it. It's just a burden for you." "I've used it when I needed it. I've earned it," I said, my voice finally breaking. "But it's not just about using it. It's about respect. And you've lost mine. What you've done to me, to this family, you've made a mockery of everything we worked for." Her eyes softened for just a moment, but the anger returned quickly. "You've won, okay?" she said through clenched teeth. "But it's not over. We'll figure something out. We'll take this to court." I shook my head, feeling the anger I had carried for so long start to dissipate. replaced by a deep sadness. "There's nothing left to figure out. You've lost this battle, Hannah, and you've lost me too." Hannah looked around, finally turning to Caleb's parents for support. But they, too, seemed to realize that there was no arguing this. Caleb's father, Carl, looked up at me with a defeated expression, while Margaret, his mother, was visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Neither of them spoke. I stood there for a moment, watching as the reality of the situation sank in. The farm was mine, and I was finally standing my ground. I wasn't going to let my daughter manipulate me, or let anyone else take what I had worked my entire life for. Hannah turned and stormed off toward the driveway, her frustration palpable. Caleb's parents followed, leaving the house behind as they realized there was no way to reverse what had already been done. I didn't feel victorious. I felt a profound sense of loss. But there was something else too, a sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't at the mercy of someone else's whims. I had control over my own life again, and that was more valuable than any property. The sun was setting as I walked back inside, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle was over, and I had won. The days after that confrontation felt surreal. I had won, but the victory wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. It should have been simple, me standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and finally protecting what I had worked for. But in the quiet of the evenings, when the adrenaline wore off, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered. I had fought back, yes, but it didn't erase the pain of the betrayal. I had won the battle, but at what cost? I spent most of the weekend at the cabin, trying to distance myself from the chaos that had unfolded at the farm. Hannah's face still haunted me. I couldn't get past the coldness in her voice when she told me to leave. I had raised her. I had loved her, and this was the result of everything I had given her. I couldn't fathom how she had become someone who could so easily dismiss me, the person who had given her everything. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't just about the farm. This was bigger than that. It was about control, about the way she had manipulated me for so long, and now she was trying to take everything from me. That night I found myself staring at a photograph of Anna, taken years ago on the porch of the farmhouse. She was smiling, her eyes full of life, and I felt the familiar ache in my chest. Anna, the woman who had shared this dream with me, the woman who had loved the farm just as much as I did. It was for her that I had built Willow Ridge in the first place, and now it was all I had left of her. The thought of someone taking it from me without a second thought tore at me. But despite the ache, despite the gnawing emptiness, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let Hannah win. I couldn't let her or Caleb's family come back to take what was rightfully mine. The trust was secure. The law was on my side. But this wasn't about just legal documents. It was about respect and family, and proving to myself that I could still stand up and protect what mattered most. I woke up the next morning feeling more determined than ever. The farm was still mine, and I was not going to let anyone undermine that. But as I prepared to head back to Willow Ridge, the thought of facing Hannah again, of seeing the anger in her eyes, brought a heavy weight to my chest. I wasn't sure what I expected when I went back, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I arrived at the farm around noon, and as I pulled up, I saw their car parked just off the driveway. My heart sank. Hannah and Caleb were there again. I wasn't sure why they were back so soon after everything that had happened, but I knew I had to face them. There was no avoiding this. I walked to the front door, taking in a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This time I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let the fear or guilt control me. I had done the right thing. I had protected my home, my legacy, and it was time for Hannah to accept that. As I opened the door, I saw them standing in the living room. Hannah's eyes were red, like she had been crying, but there was still an edge to her expression. Caleb was beside her, his posture tense, as if he was waiting for me to make the first move. The tension in the room was suffocating. "Dad," Hannah started, her voice shaking slightly but still defiant. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough. You can't keep treating me like this." I crossed my arms, my stance firm. "You started this, Hannah," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had been holding back. "You took something from me, and now you want to act like I'm the one who's been in the wrong?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. You've made your point. You've taken your shots. But the farm is mine. It always has been, and it always will be. I've put up with your demands for years, but I can't do it anymore. Not with this. I could see the frustration building in her, the frustration that had been there from the moment I stood my ground and told her she couldn't take what was mine. Caleb stepped forward, trying to soften the mood, but I wasn't having it. This is ridiculous, Caleb said. We've made arrangements, Martin. It's over. Why are you still fighting this? We're just trying to make things work. I don't need you or anyone else telling me what's best for me, I shot back. This is my farm, my life. You've come in here and tried to take it from me, but you don't get to decide that. There was a long pause, the kind that felt like it could stretch on forever. Hannah was silent, staring at me with a mix of anger and something else, maybe confusion, maybe regret. But I wasn't about to back down. Not anymore. Finally she spoke. Why don't you just let it go, Dad? You're holding on to something that's too much for you now. You're old, you're alone, and it's time to move on. The words hit me harder than I expected. Old, alone. I could feel the sting, but this time it wasn't going to break me. Instead, it steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to let her make me feel small anymore. I've worked my entire life for this, Hannah. I've built everything you see around here, and I'm not going to let you take it because you think I'm old, or because Caleb's parents want it. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she dropped her gaze, her shoulders slumping slightly. I could see the conflict in her, the realization that maybe, just maybe, she had crossed a line. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make me back down. I'm done with this, I said, turning toward the door. You can stay, you can leave, but it doesn't change a thing. This is my property, and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Not anymore. I walked out, leaving them behind. I knew this wasn't over. I knew it was only a matter of time before Hannah would try to push again, try to manipulate me into giving in. But I was ready. I had drawn my line, and I wasn't going to let anyone cross it. The days after my confrontation with Hannah felt both strangely peaceful and unnervingly uncertain. I had taken a stand, no question about that, but the aftermath lingered like a shadow, always just out of sight. The farm was still mine, legally, physically, but the emotional cost of the whole ordeal was still high. I thought once they'd seen the finality of the situation, they'd back off. But deep down, I knew I was wrong. Hannah wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat easily, and neither was Caleb. It wasn't just about the farm anymore. It was about their pride, their sense of ownership over everything they thought should belong to them. Saturday morning came, and I was back at Willow Ridge Farm. The sun was rising over the hills, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of the world lift just a little. The farm was quiet, untouched by the turmoil I'd been dealing with. I stood there for a while, staring at the land Anna and I had built together, letting the serenity of the place wash over me. I had promised myself that I would stand my ground, no matter what. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. But just as quickly as that peace settled over me, I could feel the tension creeping back. Hannah's words echoed in my head. You're old. You're alone. They stung, not because they were true, but because they were weapons. She had hit me where it hurt the most, my insecurities about growing older, about the future I had always envisioned with Anna, and about the sense of isolation I had come to know since her death. I wasn't going to let Hannah's manipulations get the best of me, but I couldn't deny that her words still felt like a personal attack. I had just started my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up and I saw Hannah's name flash across it. I didn't hesitate. I had been avoiding her calls, but this time I answered. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice colder than I expected. I could almost hear the walls she had built around herself, her defenses stronger than ever. "About what?" I asked, my tone flat. I wasn't interested in her excuses or her manipulative games anymore. The lines had been drawn and I was done negotiating. "Please, just hear me out," she continued, sounding more insistent now. "Caleb and we've been thinking. This whole situation is just hurting everyone. We don't want to keep fighting. I think it's time for us to try and work this out." I could feel my pulse quicken. Work this out? She wanted to fix this by backing down? She was about to get a rude awakening. The last time we spoke, she'd been adamant that the farm was Caleb's family's. Now, she wanted to act like she hadn't just tried to take it from me. "I've heard your version of working this out, Hannah," I said, my voice thick with frustration. "But the fact is, you crossed a line. I'm not going to just hand over the farm to anyone, not to you, not to Caleb's family. I've worked too damn hard for it." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, soft and uneven. "I know, Dad, and I'm sorry. I've been wrong. I should have handled this differently. I've been so caught up in my own world, trying to make everything fit together, that I lost sight of what really matters. I just don't want to keep fighting anymore." For a moment I thought she was being sincere. The way she spoke, the vulnerability in her voice. It felt almost like the Hannah I once knew. But then reality kicked in. She hadn't changed. Not really. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was just trying to shift the blame onto something else. She still wanted to control everything. That much was clear. "I don't need your apologies, Hannah," I said, my voice steady despite the growing anger inside me. "What you've done isn't something I can just forget. You've made your choices, and I've made mine. I'm not backing down, and you shouldn't expect me to." I heard a shaky breath on the other end. "I don't know what to say, Dad. I don't know what to do." There it was again, that self-pitying tone that always seemed to creep in when things weren't going her way. I'd heard it before, back when she was younger, trying to manipulate me into giving her more money, more time, more anything she wanted. I wasn't falling for it anymore. "There's nothing you need to say, Hannah," I replied, my voice sharper now. "You've made your decisions, and I've made mine. The farm's staying with me, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take it from me." The line went quiet again, but this time I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I didn't need her approval or her understanding. I had made my decision, and this was my moment. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm not giving up, Dad. You may have the farm now, but I won't stop until I get it back." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Good luck with that, but know this. You've lost. I've protected what's mine, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me into giving it up. This is my farm, and it always will be." The call ended, and I sat there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. The fight wasn't over. I knew that. Hannah wasn't going to just let this go, not without a fight of her own. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned that there was strength in standing my ground, in saying no, in not allowing myself to be manipulated by the person who should have respected me the most. I set the phone down and took another sip of my coffee. The sun was climbing higher in the sky now, casting long shadows across the land, just as it had always done. This was my place, my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The days following that phone call with Hannah were a strange mix of relief and anticipation. I thought I had reached the end of this battle, but deep down I knew the fight was far from over. I had drawn a line in the sand, and while I had made it clear that I wasn't going to give in to their demands, I also knew Hannah wasn't the type to back down easily. She had always been stubborn, driven by a need to get what she wanted, and now it was no different. But I had no intention of letting her walk all over me. Not now. Not ever again. I spent the next few days on the farm, trying to find some semblance of peace. It was quiet here, at least. The land stretched out before me, the familiar sight of the rolling hills and the wooded paths that Anna and I had walked together so many times. This was our dream, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. But even as I stood there, taking in the view, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of tension. Every time I walked into the house, I felt the weight of the memories, of Anna's laughter, of the way we used to sit together in the evenings, planning our future, talking about how we would grow old here. It had been her dream too, and now it felt like it was being threatened by someone who had no appreciation for what we had built. I hated the fact that I was having to fight my own daughter over this. I hated that it had come to this. Saturday morning came, and I found myself standing on the porch, staring out at the horizon, trying to gather my thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my reverie. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, it's me," Hannah said, her voice strained. It wasn't the usual defiant tone I had become accustomed to. It was softer, almost pleading. "We need to talk. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize I made a huge mistake." I felt a flicker of hope at her words, but I quickly crushed it. I had been here before, listening to her apologies, hearing her say all the right things, only for her to go right back to manipulating me. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that something in her voice sounded different this time. Maybe she had finally come to her senses. "What are you asking for, Hannah?" I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Because I've already made my decision. The farm stays with me." "I know, Dad. I understand that now," she replied, and I could hear the weight of her words. "But I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I was selfish, and I let my anger and frustration get the best of me." I was silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to hear her admit that she was wrong, to hear her apologize for everything she had done. But I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud my judgment. This was bigger than just an apology. It was about trust, about respecting me and the work I had put into building this life. "I appreciate that you're saying this, but it's not enough," I said slowly, my voice hardening. "You don't get to just come back into my life and expect everything to go back to normal. You took something from me, Hannah. And you've made it clear that you didn't think much of what your mother and I built." She was quiet for a long time, and I could feel the distance between us growing. Finally, she spoke again, but this time her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean it like that, Dad," she said quietly. I was frustrated. Caleb and I have been trying to make everything work, and I thought giving the farm to his family would solve our problems. But I see now that I was wrong. I shouldn't have made that decision for you. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling a rush of emotions. Anger, yes, but also something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different. Maybe Hannah had finally learned. But then, as quickly as it came, the doubt followed. Could I really trust her again? Could I ever trust her again after everything she had done? "I don't know what to say. Hannah," I said, my voice weary. "You've hurt me more than you know, and this whole thing with Caleb's family, it's just too much. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. The farm is not for sale, not to anyone. You can't just take it and you can't decide who it goes to." "I know, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I understand now. I've been so focused on fixing everything for Caleb and his parents that I forgot about us. I forgot about you. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to lose you." Her words felt like a small victory, but I knew that this wasn't over yet. Words were just that, words. She had a long way to go to make things right, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her for what she had done. "We'll see," I said quietly. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet, Hannah, but you've taken the first step. We'll talk more soon." I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the conversation hang in the air. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, to open my heart and let her back in. But that part was small, a whisper in the back of my mind. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her again. The damage had been done, and the scars ran deep. I looked out over the farm again, the familiar landscape giving me a sense of calm, but it didn't feel quite like home anymore. The peace I had once found here had been disrupted by betrayal. I didn't know what would come next. Maybe things would get better with time, or maybe they wouldn't. But for now, I had to focus on what mattered most: the farm, my legacy, and the strength I had found in standing up for myself. As the sun began to set, I walked back inside, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take my life's work away from me again. The week following my conversation with Hannah was unsettling. Despite her apology, despite the words she'd said, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. It wasn't just about the farm anymore, and it hadn't been for a while. It was about who we had become, who she had become. I had spent so many years pouring my heart and soul into providing for my family, into making sure they had everything they needed, and now it felt like the very people I had sacrificed for were the ones trying to take everything away from me. I couldn't stop wondering. If Hannah truly understood the weight of what she had done, why did she keep testing me? Why did she keep pushing, even after I had drawn the line? I spent the next few days back at the cabin, trying to gain some perspective. I found myself staring at the phone more often than I liked, hoping for some sign that maybe, just maybe, things would go back to how they were before everything fell apart. But as much as I wanted to believe that things would magically fix themselves, I knew deep down that I couldn't go back to the way things were. That was something I had to come to terms with. The betrayal wasn't just about the farm. It was about the loss of trust. And once that was gone, it couldn't just be restored with a few kind words. It was a Thursday when I got the call. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me, half drunk and cold. The sun was high in the sky, filtering through the trees outside, casting a gentle glow across the wooden walls of the cabin. I didn't expect to hear from Hannah, not after everything that had happened. I certainly didn't expect to hear from her with good news. But as the phone rang, I felt my pulse quicken, as if my body already knew something was coming. "Hannah," I said, not bothering to hide the uncertainty in my voice. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling just slightly, but there was something else in her tone, urgency. "I need to talk to you. It's about Caleb's parents." I sat up straighter in my chair. My heart skipped a beat. Caleb's parents? What now? I had hoped this would be over, that we had finally reached a resolution, but from the sound of her voice, I knew something had changed again. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "They're really pushing," she said quickly. "They've been talking to Caleb, and they're saying that if they don't get the farm, they'll do whatever it takes to get it. They're looking at legal options, Dad. They're not backing down. I think we need to get ahead of this. I don't want this to tear us apart anymore." The words hit me hard, but I was already prepared. Part of me had been expecting this, and yet, hearing it confirmed still made my stomach churn. They weren't going to stop, were they? Caleb's family had been persistent from the start, and now they were bringing legal threats into it. It wasn't about the farm anymore. It was about power. It was about control. It was about manipulating everyone around them to get what they wanted. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath, leaning back in my chair. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. "How many times do I have to say no, Hannah? I told you, the farm is mine. You can't just give it away because someone else wants it." "I know, Dad," she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "I know, but you've got to understand. They don't see it the way we do. They think they have a right to it, and I don't know what they'll do if we don't comply." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was the moment I had been preparing for. This wasn't about just standing my ground anymore. This was about protecting my family from the chaos they had created. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I had learned that anger alone wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed to be calm, calculated. "All right," I said, setting my coffee mug down with a soft clink. "I'll deal with it. I'll have the lawyer send a cease and desist letter, but you need to understand, Hannah, this is the last time I'm discussing this. If they want to keep pushing, they'll have to go through me." "I don't want to fight anymore, Dad," she said quietly, her words hanging heavily in the air. "I don't want us to keep tearing each other apart, but I also don't want Caleb's family coming between us." For the first time in days, I felt a twinge of something like hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Was she finally realizing the damage she'd caused? Was she finally starting to understand that I wasn't the one standing in her way? It was Caleb's family that was pushing everything to the brink. I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't sure if I could. I couldn't risk being hurt again. "I know you don't want this to tear us apart, Hannah," I said, my voice steady. "But you've already made choices that hurt me, and if you want to fix this, you need to prove to me that you understand the gravity of what you've done. I'm not a doormat, and I won't be manipulated anymore." The line was silent for a moment, and I could feel the tension building. Then she spoke again, her voice softer this time, almost vulnerable. "I'll do whatever it takes, Dad. I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you." I didn't know if I believed her, but something in her voice made me want to hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of our relationship. Maybe there was still a chance for us to rebuild, for me to forgive her. But I wasn't about to let go of what I had worked for. Not now, not ever. We'll talk more when I get back, I said, feeling the weight of the decision in my chest. But for now, I'll handle the legal side. I won't let them take what's mine. I'll make things right, Dad, she promised, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The call ended, and I sat there in the quiet cabin, the reality of the situation settling in. The farm wasn't just a piece of land anymore. It was the battleground of my life, the last connection I had to the life Anna and I had built together. I wasn't about to let anyone tear that down. Not Hannah, not Caleb's family, not anyone. The days that followed the phone call with Hannah were filled with a quiet, unsettling anticipation. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was coming, something that would either resolve everything or force me to dig in even deeper. Caleb's family was relentless, and despite my firm stance, I could sense that they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. I knew Hannah was torn between loyalty to them and the growing realization that she had crossed a line with me, but the thought of Caleb's parents stepping into the picture again made my blood run cold. I spent those days preparing myself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. There were small things I could do around the farm to keep busy, but most of the time I found myself pacing the house, checking my phone over and over, and going through all the legal documents once again. The trust was in place. That was the only thing keeping the farm safe. But even with that security, I knew this wasn't just about paperwork anymore. It was about standing up for my dignity, for the life Anna and I had built together. By the time Saturday morning rolled around, I had a decision to make. I had made it clear that I wouldn't back down, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about keeping the farm. It was about something deeper, about asserting my right to live the way I saw fit, to not be manipulated by anyone, especially not my own daughter. She had already tried to take everything I had worked for once, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else take it again. As I drove toward the farm that morning, I couldn't help but replay the events of the last few weeks. Hannah's face, when she had first told me to leave, was burned into my memory. The coldness, the way she dismissed everything I had given her, had shaken me to my core. And yet, as I thought about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I still had a chance to fix things with her. She was my daughter, after all. I had spent years loving her, supporting her, trying to give her the best I could. I wanted to believe there was still a way forward, even if that meant learning to forgive her. When I arrived at Willow Ridge, everything felt different. The house, the fields, the rolling hills, nothing had changed, but somehow it felt like the place had been altered by the tension that had surrounded it. As I pulled up to the driveway, I saw Hannah's car parked near the front door, Caleb's truck behind it. They were already there. I parked the car and took a deep breath. This was it. The final showdown. I wasn't just confronting my daughter anymore. I was confronting everything I had sacrificed, everything I had built, and everything I was willing to fight for. No more appeasing, no more bending. I had already tried to be patient, to understand her. Now it was time for her to understand me. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. As I approached the door, I could see through the windows that they were inside, moving around, probably talking about their plans for the farm. I took a moment to steady myself before I knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and there she was, Hannah. Her face was tense, her eyes guarded. She looked at me, and for a moment there was silence between us. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the realization that this wasn't going to be easy. "Dad," she said quietly, stepping aside so I could enter. "We need to talk." "I think we do," I replied, stepping past her and into the living room. Caleb was sitting on the couch, his arms crossed, staring at me with a mixture of defiance and unease. He was clearly waiting for me to make the first move, to show whether I would back down. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. "I'm not here to fight," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I'm here to make sure you both understand one thing. This farm is mine, and it's staying with me." Hannah opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. I wasn't going to let this conversation go the way it had before. "Before you say anything else," I continued, I want you to understand that this isn't about the farm anymore. It's about respect. I've spent my life building this place, and I'm not going to let anyone, least of all my own daughter, take it from me. Do you understand?" Her face softened slightly, but there was still that defensiveness in her eyes. She was struggling, torn between what she thought was right and what I was telling her. "Dad, I don't want to fight. I don't want to lose you over this. Caleb's parents, they're struggling. I thought it was the right thing to do." "The right thing?" I said, feeling the anger stir again. "You thought giving away my farm was the right thing to do? You've spent your whole life depending on me, and now you want to take from me what's left of my life's work? I don't care if Caleb's parents are struggling. That's not my responsibility." "I know," she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been selfish. I didn't think about it like that. I just wanted to fix everything. But I see now that I've messed up, that I've hurt you." I stared at her for a long moment, wondering if this was genuine, if she was finally starting to understand, but a part of me still hesitated. How many times had I heard her apologize before, only for her to go right back to trying to control things? "Do you?" I asked, my voice softer now, but still laced with the pain of everything she had done. "Do you really understand? Because if you do, then you need to prove it, not with words but with actions. And that means accepting that this farm is mine and it's staying with me." Hannah's eyes dropped to the floor, and I saw a flicker of regret pass over her face. For the first time, I felt like I had gotten through to her. But then Caleb stood up, his voice rising as he stepped toward me. "Look, we didn't ask for this fight," he said, his tone defensive. "We just thought it would be easier. You know, we thought you'd be willing to make things work, but if you're not, then fine. We're done." His words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't back down. I couldn't. "You don't get to decide when it's over, Caleb," I said. "This is my life, my home, and you're not going to take it." Hannah stood there silent, her eyes shifting between Caleb and me. I could see the weight of the decision she had to make. She could stand by him, or she could stand by me. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure which way she would go. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, her voice small. "I was wrong. This farm is yours. I'll tell Caleb's parents it's not happening." I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, letting her words sink in. She was finally making the right choice, but it was a choice that had come far too late. "I hope you mean it, Hannah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I hope you understand now, because I'm not going to keep fighting you." And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could go back to some semblance of normal. Maybe this battle was over. In life, standing up for yourself and setting clear boundaries is essential. People will often test your limits, especially those closest to you, and it's easy to fall into the trap of people-pleasing or sacrificing your own needs to keep the peace. But true respect in relationships is earned through mutual understanding, and sometimes that means saying no when it matters most. Don't be afraid to protect what you've worked hard for, whether it's your career, your personal boundaries, or your emotional well-being. Be mindful of those who may try to manipulate or take advantage of your generosity, and always remember that you are not responsible for carrying the weight of others' expectations. If you find yourself constantly compromising your values or sacrificing your peace for others, it may be time to reassess the relationship. Family, friends, or colleagues should be supportive, not demanding. And if they are taking more than they give, it's okay to distance yourself or set firmer boundaries. Respect is not something to be given away lightly. It should be mutual. And most importantly, don't be afraid to stand firm in your decisions, even if it means facing discomfort or difficult emotions. Your peace is worth fighting for.